Fellas, welcome to another loot guide. Today we're doing an unexpected one. Factory. Shout out my boy Judius. I plan to do a factory loot guide eventually, however, your request helped me speed it along in the timeline. Anyways, if you're unfamiliar how this works, we're going to be covering the run itself. I'm going to be doing a 3 raid average as far as how long the raids took and how much money we earned average across the 3 raids that we did. And I'm going to give it a rating out of 5 stars as far as danger and overall loot is concerned. Factory is obviously very small, so we're not going to be splitting the runs into 2 different loot runs this time, just one overall factory haul. So without further ado, I'll see y'all on raid, fellas. I'm going to be switching between this editing software to kind of give you an idea of where we're going on the map. If you're unfamiliar with Factory, it'll help give you an idea. And then I'm going to swap between that and gameplay every now and then. So in the footage, we spawned somewhere around here. I think either one of those 2 spots. There is, I'm pretty sure it's this room right here. There's a dead scav, and there ended up being a toolbox in the middle here. Probably another toolbox spawn or a duffel bag in here somewhere, but those 2 can spawn there at least. I wouldn't spend too much time looting around in the basement in Factory. I'd just kind of use it as a safer path to get to one end of the map to the other. However, not all parts of the basement are as safe, but we'll get to that in a minute. But spawning from here, I go ahead and run to the Pulkim bunker, or I think Factory calls it, hold on. Factory calls it the Terror Group Storage Room Keycard. It's a 10-use keycard, nothing too crazy behind this bunker door. However, I think it's needed for a quest, and the keycard, I bought it for 16 million for a full 10-use. Don't know if that's exactly worth it, but if you have it, or if you just want to have some fun gambling, go for it. There's a few military grade safes behind it. However, a lot of the times I hit the safe over here, it was mostly empty. But this safe is very unique in the fact that it's the only safe that I know of in the game that spawns like gunpowder and stuff like that. But along with that, there's a jacket on the wall, there's a few duffel bags and toolboxes scattered around, a bit of loose loot as well. Staying within the basement here, we head to the middle part where the 3 silos are. There is 2 dead scavs in this kind of open, broken silo. Dead scav loot pools are quite powerful, so don't skip over them. There might be a bit of loose loot and maybe a duffel bag nearby as well. I can't exactly remember. Going to the last part of the basement that I will mention, the underwater part. There's a few gun boxes scattered around the corners. I think a big old technical supply crate here you can loot, as well as loose loot scattered around. It's not uncommon to find some fuels, like metal fuels. Before we head up from basement, I wanted to mention a few more containers that we won't really mention. There's a few dead scavs in this middle area that you could hit, as well as a couple toolboxes and weapon boxes around that area. I'm sure there's more loot throughout the basement, however, it's not that worth searching for. Keep in mind though, if I do miss any loot containers, feel free to drop them in the comments. Anyways, we'll head up the underwater ramp here to head to med tent. There is a ration supply crate right next to the ramp here, as well as 2 med bags in the tent. There's a bit of loose medical loot, of course, scattered around near the med bags as well, so keep an eye out. Again, there's a lot of green weapon boxes scattered around this area. You kind of have to search for them. There's loose ammo spawns on the kind of power equipment in this area. There's about 2 to 3 jackets in this room here, a toolbox at least in this room here. I know there's a weapon box somewhere in the outside area, and I'm sure a few other containers in the outside area as well. Pretty sure the weapon boxes, it's somewhere along this wall, I know. But heading back inside here, if you head to this back corner, there is a good bit of toolbox spawns as well as loose junk item loot. But yeah, a few toolboxes. I did want to mention this whole area in itself, very, very dangerous as far as PvE Tarkov is concerned. Most of your PMCs, most of your Tagilla spawns will be in this area. A few of them in this area as well, but PvE, the office area, not nearly as dangerous as it is in PvP. Heading into one of the expanded parts of Factory, one of the recently expanded parts, there's a few jackets directly in this door here. As well in these kind of side rooms, there's a few duffel bags, some loose loot as well. Heading up the stairs, we have the medical area. There is a slew, like 2 or 3 medical bags, as well as loose medical loot throughout it. That's mostly good for that building. However, heading to the side building, there's a chance of a toolbox spawning. I'm sure some medical, or not medical, some loose junk as well. Sticking near this area, there's a few green weapon boxes that spawn around this little shack here, as well as to the side of this green container. There's another weapon box that can spawn on the rafters up here, as well as I think a few jackets, don't quote me on this, in the little shack up in the rafters as well. Backtracking a little bit here, in this kind of dangerous spawn with the hallway as well. There's a dead scab to loot here, and then 2 jackets on this wall. They've always kind of spawned, so... Heading back to the office area, the first floor of office is probably one of the most loot-dense areas in Factory. You can honestly find up to like 5 different toolboxes and or duffel bags. There's a few jackets along this wall as well, but a lot of the toolboxes and duffel bags will spawn kind of in the corners against the walls here. Of course, there's a safe under the desk here on the first floor now. There's a duffel bag in this corner and the chair right here. If you're playing PvP, you can unlock this room. I'm pretty sure it's one of the arena keys. Haven't done it myself. The old PvE players are stuck back here in the Stone Ages, but we'll catch up, I'm hoping. Anyways, we'll head up to second floor here. Second floor has like 2 to 3 whole containers you can loot. There's a tiny bit of loose loot as well, but if you're really hurting for it, there's another weapon box somewhere in the back corner here, and then a dead scav in the kind of middle. There is a lot of dead scav corpses that do spawn back here. However, a lot of them you can't loot for some reason. We'll head upstairs to the 3rd story. And the first thing you want to check out in the 3rd story is there's 2 kind of shelves either side of the hallway here that spawn some loose weapon loot, various other loose loot. There's of course a dead scav next to one of these shelves in front of the office. Of course, you go into the office itself, you have the typical safe, 2 jackets along the left side wall, and then 2 filing cabinets in the back corner, as always. I did want to mention that in one of the runs, I did find a dorm's marked key. However, I did not count it in the totals for 2 reasons. 1, because I wanted to keep it for a video where I use up the entire key and see how much money I earn at the end of it. Speaking of those, go check those out. Those are pretty cool. And 2, because it would have had quite an outlier as far as averages are concerned, so it just kind of worked out. But I did want to mention it. I found it in one of the jackets, I believe, in the office upstairs. Of course, you go into the office itself, you have the typical safe, 2 jackets along the left side wall, and then 2 filing cabinets in the back corner, as always. Keep in mind, if you do have the factory exit key, you could unlock the room next to office down the hallway. I've heard people get good loot out of this, bitcoins potentially. But the factory exit key, kind of expensive, only 20 uses, and I think those uses are a lot better for different factory exits and or the ZBO14 extract on customs. Getting back down to the first floor, under the rafters here, there's a few weapon boxes that can spawn in this back corner. As well as a weapon box here, and one here, and don't forget the one under the stairs here. A lot of weapon boxes in factory. Bear with me. If you head back up on top of these rafters, there are even more weapon boxes right here and here. Again, not a guaranteed spawn for any of these, so. This is where my memory gets a little wishy-washy. Again, if I'm missing things in the comments, let me know. I'd be happy to hear about them. That sounded sarcastic, but I swear. Oh, you're good. You head up these stairs. There's a little kind of server area. There's a weapon box that can spawn up there. You head into dead scav bunker. Of course, there's a dead scav. I believe either a jacket or duffel bag in that back corner, and loose medical loot in the locker. Maybe some loose other loot, but I recall finding Soleil in here pretty often. I almost missed the center area here. Head up here. I'm not really adding the paths as much because factory's so small. You can kind of move around the map however you need be, depending on where scavs are and such. But there's a few more green weapon boxes along this area. Don't exactly remember where they are, but there's a toolbox on the barrels here. A few jackets as well here. Duffel bag that can spawn on the couch here. And I guess from here you could head up to rafters and loot rafters. I'm not entirely sure if there's any loot in rafters. If there is, probably not a lot, so you can kind of explore on your own with that. And I think that does it as far as my knowledge is concerned. Again, I'm sure there's a few toolboxes and green weapon boxes I'm missing around these areas. Probably some along here as well. Alrighty, so I've just totaled her up. And factory, not the longest map of all time, so our average time is going to be kind of set along that boundary of how long I wanted to stay in raid and cut it close to that MIA status. So our average time came out to be 17 minutes and 30 seconds. Again, cutting it real close to that MIA status, but if you really want to maximize your loot in factory, you kind of got it. And our average money ended up coming out to be 941,000 rubles. Again, not a lot, but it's factory. What can you expect? You're kind of at the mercy of your luck. Like I said, I did find that dorms marked room, so it's not all set in stone. Overall loot rating, I gotta give it like a 1.5, but again, it's factory. It's hard to rate it just off of loot because that's not really what it's for, but that's what we're doing it for. Danger rating, I gotta give it like a foe. A foe if Tagilla spawned, which he kind of does pretty often, so I'll just leave it at a cool foe. And the amount of AI PMCs that can spawn in this kind of big area next to Med10 definitely catches you off guard sometimes. But the extracts are nice, at least. Anyways, like I said, let me know what I missed. And if you guys are going to attempt looting factory, and I will say, don't forget to loot your scav backpacks and AI PMC backpacks. They might have some goodies for you. I did find a Bitcoin on an AI PMC's backpack recently, so if that gives you incentive, go ahead and hit that search button. Next video is probably going to be a Lightkeeper, either the one before this or the one after this, so keep an eye out for that. And as always, thank you for joining me yet again.